Speaking of setting low expectations,
good transition.
This is why I've been trying to explain to my former Republican brothers and sisters that you want to be like Bear Bryant. You want to set low expectations. And they've been too stupid to do that up until like maybe the last 15 minutes. And now they're saying, now it's projection or confession. Now they're going around saying he's going to like get coked up or smash Ritalin and snort it before the debate.
Yeah, they appear a little bit concerned about this, leaning heavily now on that drug conspiracy theory. Yeah. President Joe Biden remains this morning at Camp David in the middle of intense preparation for this week's debate against Donald Trump, now just 2 days away. Three people familiar with the Biden campaign's plans tell NBC News the president is studying how best to get under Donald Trump's skin in order to, quote, trigger his opponent at Thursday's debate in Atlanta. If Trump comes out more disciplined than he has on past occasions, sources say, the president's goal will be to bring out, quote, rally Trump, the rambling one. One way he may try to do that, these people say, is by painting the former president as a loser for failing to win the 2020 election. At the same time, a Biden campaign official stresses there is, quote, a fine line to walk because they still want Americans to come away with the impression the president is the adult in the room. As for Trump's debate prep, NBC reported last week the former president is having policy discussions with allies as opposed to formal prep sessions. So, Jim Messina waiting patiently as we run through the day in sports. Let's get you back into your wheelhouse here and talk about debate prep and what we should expect when those two men get on the stage. What will you be looking for on Thursday in Atlanta?
A clear contrast between the two candidates. I mean, I used to say to President Obama, if you're on the defense, we're losing. But if it's a choice between the two candidates, we'll win. And I think that's even more true now, Willie. I think what Biden wants out of this debate is have the American people look at both of them and remember why they fired Donald Trump 4 years ago and why they hired Joe Biden. And if he can be that guy, then I think that'll be a successful night. And that's going to be the goal of the Biden campaign. Trump has a different and somewhat easier task. He just has to look sane. I mean, recently in some of the appearances, I mean, my God, Willie, he talked about shark attacks the other day for 5 minutes. Yeah. I mean, as long as he doesn't do that, I mean, you know, the expectations for him are fairly low here. And I think he's just got to appear somewhat sane in front of the national public.
Yeah, you know, Elise, implicit in this whole riff they're on about Joe Biden going to be on drugs, needs to drug test him, is they're saying he was so good at the State of the Union, he must be on something. So they can't figure out whether he's a doddering old man or that he killed it at the State of the Union and there must be something up. So what will you be looking for on Thursday?
Well, as an aside, I really wish both would just take drug tests because it would be fascinating to see what Donald Trump has been on for so many years. Whatever, you know, speculating 80s diet drugs. Aside from the fact that it, you know, that it has just been so many dumb accusations tossed out there. Basically, the Trump campaign's made a huge mistake by setting expectations so low. And if Joe Biden goes out and he's anything less than looking like he's been hanging out under a bridge and drinking and doing drugs all night, like he really probably is going to have a victory. So they just have set the expectations so low.
Yeah, John, as you know, covering this White House so closely every day, the campaign will tell you the stakes are very high for Donald Trump, but also for Joe Biden. He needs to come out perhaps like he did at the State of the Union, exceed those expectations, and show, because of the questions about his age, even among some of his supporters, among Democrats, among independents still deciding which way to lean, that he's still up for this job as he did at the State of the Union.
They know that. The Biden campaign is clear-eyed. This is a very big moment. They wanted a debate this early because they wanted to change the trajectory of the race, which has been close all along. But in the battleground states, Donald Trump has enjoyed, for the most part, narrow leads, although we've seen that polling close a little bit in recent weeks. But they know, much like the State of the Union, there are questions about Joe Biden's age. There's questions about his ability to continue doing this job for another 4 years. And they feel like this is a moment to sort of settle some of those doubts. I'll simply note about the Republicans, if with attacks about Joe Biden potentially being on drugs, attacks on the CNN moderators, those are not the kind of things you do if you're confident about your guy in the debate, Eugene Robinson. And that's because we know look, Donald Trump for minutes at a time, can appear disciplined and on the ball, but we know that usually doesn't last. We know that the Biden campaign is going to try to provoke rambling monologues about sharks. You, in fact, just wrote about how for Donald Trump, every week is Shark Week, and that's where it is here, too. We know that the stakes are high for Joe Biden, that he has to look like he's up for the job. But so does Donald Trump. And for a lot of Americans, Thursday night will be the first time they really hear Donald Trump in 4 years. They might be surprised what they find.
Yeah, they might be very surprised to hear Trump 2024, who is obsessed with sharks. And so, if Biden wants to trigger him, just say shark and boat and let him go off. I mean, or say water. He has this other rap about water and dishwashers, and it's very confusing. But to get him into that sort of rally Trump mode in which he's all over the map. He can't complete a sentence or a thought, and he's just riffing in the most bizarre way. I think that would be kind of an ideal situation for Biden. But I basically agree with the analysis. President Biden needs to remain upright, make sense, do what he did at the State of the Union, and given where expectations have been set by the Republicans, that is a massive victory for Biden, because they have essentially conditioned the Trump base to expect Biden to fall over at the debate, or to fall asleep, or simply not to have any idea where he is, and that was a huge mistake.
Jim, we've seen stories about some snap polling since the convictions, suggesting that it has actually. Karl Rove, we played a clip of Karl Rove going over the numbers over the past week or two since conviction, showing that it has made a difference. Not a massive difference, but especially among independents and the voters that matter the most and who's going to determine the outcome of this election, it's mattered. With that in mind, how does Joe Biden handle Donald Trump's 34 felony convictions?
Like he points out repeatedly that it's about Donald Trump. This has always been about him. He's on a revenge tour. They have a new ad this morning talking about that, talking about how Joe Biden's for the middle class and has a plan, and Donald Trump's on a revenge tour. You'll see Biden talk about the 34 convictions, a couple different ways to remind people that this is a clear choice. And I think it's really important. Joe, this entire election is going to come down to these double doubters, these voters who don't like either one of them. And this is going to be the first time Thursday night where they kind of look at this race and say, I got to make a decision here, and I want to figure out what exactly these two candidates are going to do for me. And I totally agree with Jonathan. In the end, Trump has set the expectations so low, it's going to be a difficult night for him if he can't stop Joe Biden.
Hey there, MSNBC fans. I'm Luke Russert, and be sure to join me, Rachel Maddow, Jen Psaki, Lawrence O'Donnell, Steve Kornacki, Joy Reid, and many more September 7th in Brooklyn, MSNBC Live Democracy 2024. Click on the link for ticket information. We will see you there.